and welcome to the first episode for the second quarter of Talks with the Elders, with me, your host, Tam Dillon. Today, we're exploring a topic that shapes things like your identity, your relationships, your spiritual experience, and for so many people across different generations, and that is purity culture. Purity culture is often presented as moral guidance, but for many, it's functioned as a system of conditioning and control. And it shapes how people understand things like their bodies, their worth, their roles in society. And of course, I think the most biggest thing is their relationship with God, Source, and the divine. Today, I'm joined by Paula Barlow. Paula has personal experience inside a high control religious environment here in the US, and she brings both lived experience and hard earned insights to the conversation. And today we're not approaching this topic from a place of speculation or making accusations or anything like that. Rather, we're here to understand how purity frameworks actually operate, how they shape things like your identity and your behavior, and what it takes to rebuild things like self-trust and the self outside of that, coming out of environments. So, Paula, thank you hugely for being here, and your willingness to share your story with me and the critical mass community. So we're going to jump straight into discussing what purity culture actually is, how it was defined, and how it was taught inside your environment specifically.
Yes, thank you, Tam. So for me, we wore the long dresses. So I can talk a little bit about the cult. It is the FLDS, so Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. And for purity culture for us was to treat the boys and men like snakes. We were told to not look at them, to not um, yeah, to just like not try not to think about boys. It reminds me of when I first started my monthly cycle. Then in one of the books that we had, the one of the mothers was showing me, then it said in the beginning, now is the time to like start thinking about a boyfriend. And I was teasing one of my sisters about it. And so she went and told on me, and the mother was like, got after me, like, we don't think about boys, we don't think about any of that kind of stuff. But I think for like I feel like that falls into purity culture. We don't think about the boys, we cover ourselves, clear up to our collarbone and our ankles. Um, and yeah, just making sure that we're keeping so other people aren't looking at us, and making sure that we're modest.
Mm. So in a sense, hiding who you are as you're coming into those developmental stages as a teenager, and I'd imagine coming into womanhood as well, like
Right.
constantly just disguising who you actually are. Mm.
And not drawing any type of attention to yourself. Just it's basically like you're nobody. Make sure no one sees you, no one hears you, and yeah, staying. That's I mean, in my mind, I just see like a really small, just stay small, stay little, don't make a noise, kind of a thing.
Mm. And I mean that must be as you come into adulthood, and I know you've left the Latter-day Saints now. What has that journey been like for you in like establishing identity for yourself and making yourself not have to feel like you got to make yourself small, or I can't have a place for existence. What kind of dynamic has that been like for you?
So interesting. When I started doing a lot of energy work and a lot of healing work around it, because I remember we were taught like therapy is bad. I remember like right after we had just left, and it was like getting help is only for people that are like mentally unwell. I mean, in a sense, we kind of were, we've been really, everything we've been taught was very confined in a box. We were told what to wear, what to eat, what to do, how to do our hair, but our hair, in the waves and the braids and stuff. Um, and I remember hearing, therapy isn't for, we don't need that, only for like mentally insane. And I remember thinking, I do need some help. Like I knew I needed some help in some type of way. And I know not everyone feels that way. This was just my experience. So I looked into Cherished Families was the one that they came out to Short Creek, and they're there to help people leave the FLDS. And I reached out to them because they were offering, they're giving free therapy at the time to people that were just leaving. So I found me a therapist through them, and we kind of started talking, and I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere with like the couch therapy, kind of like sitting on the couch and talking. I remember going in and thinking, okay, what am I going to talk about this week? And
Mm.
not like, okay, maybe we'll talk about this, but we talked about something before and I didn't know what else to talk about. I wasn't getting steps when I was going. So I kind of started looking more towards energy work, and one of my moms was like, "You should see this lady." And I started seeing her, and that really helped me catapult into I think feeling like my self-worth. I was around a lot of women too. I just deep dived into energy work. I'm like, this is what I need to learn. My first session, I was like, I have to learn what this lady does so that I can help other people. And what I come to realize over my years of learning what this lady was teaching me is the person that I was helping was myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's for a lot of practitioners, and you and yourself being a practitioner today. That brings a lot of us to the path is usually working through our own self and healing the self. Um,
Yeah.
and I find that amazing that because I hear that a lot where people say, therapy's not working for me. Just sitting on the couch and talking about it's not giving me the steps. It's not giving me the processes that I need. I think it lacks the integration.
Yeah,
Mm.
we're just talking. I didn't feel like we were like going anywhere. Okay, I would come in and I would talk about an experience. And I remember going in and I would laugh a lot. Like that was my coping at the time. And I remember one of my therapists, because I had a few with my experiences. I didn't, I wasn't getting anywhere with this one. And I had some experiences that I'd shared with my therapist. And my therapist at the time was like telling me how I needed to feel really bad about some of the choices that I had made when our family had just left that cult. Obviously, I didn't make some of the best decisions, but it was just interesting when she was like, you need to feel shame and you need to feel guilt. And it was interesting, like my people pleasing came out, and I remember thinking, I have to keep going to this therapist so she doesn't think that I don't like her. So
Mm.
that was really interesting to think, oh, I have to keep going to her so that so that she'll still like me, because my self-worth and thing were my self-worth and my identity and everything was pretty much zero.
Mm. Absolutely. And that kind of just reinforces the shame and the guilt that comes from living in that kind of environment as it is, because there is a lot of shame and guilt that's put across almost on a daily basis, shame in who
Oh,
you
for
are,
sure.
shame in presenting who you are. And let's chat a bit about the rules and the expectations and kind of that moral framing around your modesty, obedience, and of course, sexuality would definitely come into the conversation there as well.
So the things that they controlled the most was for sure the way we dressed as women, and men. I mean, but it's like almost like they came down harder on the women. It was more women need to just the traditional things that they say: cook, clean, raise babies, have as many babies as you can. My mother alone has eight, and I'm her oldest. And so I have two moms, and the first wife has 13, 13 children. And one of my own grandmas has 20. She has 20 children. And it's just like have as many kids as you can.
Mm.
And I guess some of the other things that are pretty strong was definitely what we like, they started taking foods, certain foods out of our diet. And towards the end, where it was getting really interesting before we left, they had in our church house, they had the men sitting in the front and the women sitting in the back. And I feel like a lot of it is to not tempt the men. Like, don't wear anything that would tempt them. But our dresses and stuff at the time were, not flattering. I mean, they could have been, if they were sewed a certain way to fit your frame, it could be
Mm.
more flattering, but it was just super interesting. Now, being out of it and looking in it's interesting.
Yeah, the I hear that a lot around purity culture, where the responsibility is put onto the woman and not onto the men. You know, you've got to dress a certain way so you're not tempting the men. You've got to do this so you're not tempting the men. But nothing ever comes in where let's educate the boys. You know, let's
Right.
educate the men. That pressure sits on the woman constantly. And what is that pressure like to have lived with?
I think the hardest part for me was like in my mind to not think like I'm hitting puberty. I left when our family left when I was 16. So I'm like right at that age where you think about boys. Just naturally we think about boys and we see them. And I remember the hardest thing for me was to not think about them. I had to like really like it's so funny like looking back because it's silly now that I'm out. But I was so they were just on my mind all the time and I'm like, how can I get them out of my mind? Like how can I not think about boys? And I would catch myself not thinking about them, be like, oh my gosh, I'm not thinking about boys. But there was a lot of things that happened with like cousins where we would get curious. And I think that since there was no education on either the boys or the girls, it's like, you don't get to know anything. I remember going into one of my mom's closets and finding a book that's called What to Expect When You're Expecting. And I was like looking for anything that had to do with like babies or sex and just like reading through that and trying to find something. But I think the biggest thing is we weren't taught any of that, and then we would go, we would hang out. We have multiple siblings and then cousins, and so there's tons of people. There's not enough adults to watch everybody, and so we would go off and we would, you'd look at each other's bodies and stuff like that. I think that with not being taught, we would just go find out ourselves. We were trying to figure it out. So it's just trying to think of like, that's more of what you were asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense because it's part of the humanness of who we are is I mean sexuality is a huge part of what we are as humans, especially coming into puberty. You have all the hormones going, so we are innately curious. No matter the upbringing, I think that curiosity is going to be there, and when it's hidden from you, you can't have access to that. I think it piques the curiosity just that much more. But why? Why can't I look at that? Why can't I know about that? And also to understand internally what's going on in your body as well. Why am I having these feelings? Why do I feel this attraction? All of this sort of stuff that goes on for us all normally.
Mhm.
That normalcy is taken and it's like, no, you can't do that. That isn't normal. That's not right. So it kind of grates against the who we are as a natural functioning human being. Um, and how was that um, positioned as a way of we're doing this to protect you, or we're doing this to maintain our righteousness and our pureness? How was that kind of put across to particularly I think the youngsters?
I thinking back to like my mind at the time and just the way that I'm being young, I didn't see it as a safety thing really.
Mm,
It just was like, this is what we did, this is the way we dressed. So it wasn't like, oh, we're being safe and we're keeping covered so that, you know, keep every part of you covered, because we wore like 7 layers of clothes. It wasn't just the dress. We had, long underwear, slips, leggings, multiple like layers of stuff to cover our bodies. And then even like us sisters, we would share a room, and if we were to get dressed in the morning, we would go into the closet, and even if it was a closet that just had like, the door right here and then your clothes are all hanging up right here, we would like try to hide behind the door to put our dress on. We'd take off our nightgown and then put our dress on and nobody could see. So I think it was a lot of pressure to just make sure nobody saw your body, not even, you're in your room with your sisters, even though we had the other layers on, and we took off our nightgown, but we're still wearing everything else and just put on the dress. It was just very much like nobody sees your body, and not even you. And there was a time where they asked us, this is how I interpreted it. I'm not sure how it was, taught at the time. But it was like they asked us, I don't remember if it was like over the pulpit or if it was an interview, but if we were like touching ours or looking at ourselves when we're showering or whatever. And I remember showering and trying not to like look at my body,
Mm.
because I'm like, we're not supposed to look at our bodies or touch ourselves. How am I supposed to wash myself if I'm not supposed to touch myself? But I didn't understand. They probably were talking about masturbation or whatever, but just being told to not touch ourselves and not look at our body.
Mm. Again, it causes that huge inner conflict with the self of like, how do I function on a day-to-day basis and not do these things that I'm being told not to do? um, and let's chat about the shame and the body and the self-worth factor that comes into that, and how purity messaging shaped your relationship with your body. What was that relationship forming like for you in those days?
Being so curious, like more about the like our, the boy's body and the girl's body. And I didn't really think about, like, I wasn't thinking of weight. I wasn't looking at people and being like, oh my gosh, like their body's shape is different than my body shape. I think I was just so in my own experience towards sexuality. I feel like that was a big one. Like that's when I think back on my childhood, I think of that. And it's just interesting. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You're good. We're looking at how that messaging had shaped your relationship with your own body, that kind of
So
like purity enforcement.
I feel like the older I've gotten and the more I'm definitely more free now. I don't have shame around my body now, but at the time when we left, I remember like changing from our dresses to a skirt, like it was still a long skirt and, a long sleeve shirt that I was wearing and even up to my collarbone. I remember thinking, this feels so weird. Like, people are going to see my body, even though, I mean, it wasn't even more flattering than the dress. That middle stage between not wearing the dress and finding your style, there was some really interesting outfits, just figuring it out. But I'm gonna go into a little bit like right after we left, about how I think I kind of got to where I'm at now a little bit, is from being really super controlled to leading. And I think for me, the pendulum just swung clear to the other side. So we're super controlled. We have to dress a certain way, do these certain things. And I went clear to the other side and I started partying. We had massive parties around the time that I had left. Our family had left. And I'd go to these parties, and I think this is where I got a lot of my, um, where a lot of like the shame around my body went away. I didn't realize I had it, but if someone like a girl was like, I've never seen boobs or I've never seen what a vagina looks like, I was just like, okay, you want to see? And I would show them. So going from here wearing dresses and 7 layers to boom, you want to see my boobs. and then bringing the pendulum back to the middle and um, not because it's so interesting, the clothes I was wearing here, and now I'm come to the middle, and I'm like, okay, yeah, now I can knowing the time and the place to wear certain clothes just for me, but not shaming like any of my younger siblings because sometimes where I work right now, I do work for someone that's this just leaving the community right now. And sometimes like I'll have siblings come in, little sisters come in, and they'll be wearing like a belly shirt, and I know that, they don't like that. And so not telling her, "Oh, you need to change in order to come to my office. You can't look like that." Like I feel the inklings come in of like she shouldn't wear that.
Mm.
So it's interesting to see like I've swung clear over here back to I feel like I'm more in the middle now. And then when I see like my sisters come in and I'm working here for these people that are just leaving and trying not to be like, you need to change when you come in here. So there's still those little thoughts pop up. For me, I didn't say anything to her, but it was interesting to recognize that the little thoughts are popping up
Mm.
where I'm working.
But like that reinforcement runs so deeply that until you're faced with someone coming into an environment that's similar to what you were raised in, or people that are coming out of that environment where you're coming from the place of like respect for the environment that you're working in, but it's tapering a little bit on how you were raised and what you
Hmm.
were told. And it,
Yeah.
it really speaks to like how deeply that stuff gets ingrained in those types of cults and cultures, um, and yeah, finding the balance of not reinforcing the shame that you were put through. It's
Hmm.
like we all need to express ourselves the way that we are. But also, here's the lines and the boundaries. It can be a difficult one to try and navigate. Yeah.
Right. Because I definitely don't want to pass the shame on. I don't want her to feel like you have to change who you are. Because I'm like, I don't want to, yeah, like you said it perfectly. I don't want to shame them or
Mm.
at all. I just, it's interesting. It's a fine line.
I could definitely see that, especially because of, age and, because at certain ages we are more reciprocal to external noise and words and people telling us you should be like this, you should be like that, because we're trying to establish the self, we're trying to establish that identity, and we don't want to have such a huge bearing on someone that comes across as a negative experience for
Right.
them. Hmm. And let's chat about the kind of that internalized shame and fear. For you in growing up in that environment and then moving out of that environment. What has that journey been like with that shame and the fear for yourself? What has that journey been like?
I mean, it makes me think about too when the transition from the dress to the skirt to the pants to the shorts. And there was a lot of when the girl us, so like there's a few of us girls around the same age, we would wear shorts and maybe our dad would make a comment about it, or a belly shirt, and they would say you can't wear that in our house. So you could be wearing, I don't know, a skirt, and maybe you're wearing a crop top, and it's like, no, you can't wear that in our house. So working through not letting, I mean, not letting their opinions like get to me, but also trying to respect their boundaries as well. I get, yeah, I'm in your house and you don't want me to look like this, but there was times where they would tell us to change what we're wearing because somebody's coming over and we don't want them to see it like that. So there's a lot of shame, like, oh, I have to change. I have to change. I can't express myself actually because it makes other people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I need to stay a certain way so that everyone, yeah, feels comfortable and I'm not, it goes back, it's still, it's so deep. It goes back to not letting people, see you or hear you. I was getting Reiki certified and I was telling the lady that was doing my certification, I'm like, I feel like a little mouse in the corner of this room. And it was interesting because we're in a room and I felt so tiny. I felt like this little teeny tiny mouse. And she's like, well, then scream. And I'm like, I can't scream. Like, people will hear me scream. I can't do that.
Mm.
And so she walked me through that, but it was just, it does run deep. I feel like it's a daily effort to, when those little things pop up, those little thoughts pop into your mind, to reframe it. For me, that is what it is. Like they'll come in and I'm like, yeah, no, not doing that today. Or I'll say something loving and kind. If it's about me specifically, I'm usually pretty good at my self-talk, and I'll reframe it and be like, I'm not there anymore. I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, and that's a practice that one would need to have developed over the years with the self. That developing a relationship with the self. It's I don't have to feel this way. What has
Yeah.
been developing that relationship been like for you?
I've had, it's been very interesting. I had an experience in South Carolina, and I had spent the night drinking with some of my friends and work friends, and I had come home and my self-talk was so bad. I was telling myself what a shitty person I was, how horrible I was to have been drinking. I knew better. And I sat down and my friend was like, Paula, you don't have to do that. You don't have to, sit there and shame yourself and tell yourself that you're a bad person. And it was like a light switch flipped in my brain. I was like, holy crap. I don't have to sit here and say, you're a horrible person. You only do bad things. Just you could have made a better choice. And she just gave me that grace to, I didn't have to be mean to myself in that moment. And I feel like from that moment, I was like, holy crap, I don't have to be mean. And it just has been from that moment to when the little thoughts pop into my mind that I just will reframe it. And when I'm having a really rough day and I'm struggling, I'm like, I'm still a good person. I still deserve love. I'm still kind. I'm not out there actually, hurting people. So, yeah.
I love that because it's just simple adjustments sometimes that help to undo something that's been reinforced so intensely for so many years, that it really is just like flipping that switch that says, hey, you're not a bad person. Just because you want to have this experience or go out and have fun or have a couple of drinks with friends, um,
Mm-hmm.
there is the mental gymnastics that kind of goes on around that, and having someone say, hey, you're okay, like you're fine, like you're doing all right, you're not doing anything malicious. And I think for a lot of people that are moving out of these types of environments, that's something that I've come across quite a bit in holding religious trauma circles in the past, is that mental gymnastics of, I just want to live a regular functional adult life, I want to go out and have fun and experience life, but my brain is like, no, you can't do that because of that old reinforcing. So to have people around you that are willing to um, give you that grace, like you said, and hold that space for you and say, hey, you're not actually you're not actually harming anyone, you're not hurting anyone, you're not doing anything that's intentionally bad or wrong. You're just out there living the life that you want to live for yourself and making those choices for yourself. um, let's chat a bit about control in the gender roles, and you've touched on this a bit already, where you've got the separation of the men and the women and the boys and the girls, and it's very much aligned to all the pressure kind of sitting on the woman. um, So, and we've chatted about those expectations. Let's chat a bit about the connection between morality and submission, and how purity culture reinforces obedience and compliance.
Control. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Because if we're easier to control when, you need to be this certain way, you need to do it this way. Like the control, I think sometimes like it's in the back of my mind. I'm like, "Oh, I don't really remember." But then I start talking and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember when we had to do this or we had to do that. And it was the women, like we would do monthly cleanings and it was the women that got everybody together and we did it this way. And we would do when it got more stricter, like towards the end, like when we left, then they had where we do hourly prayers, and it was the women that brought everybody together because the men are out, doing men things. My mother was telling me of an experience where she almost gave birth on the floor because her husband wasn't in a hurry to come get her and take her to the clinic to have her baby. He was just, doing, he was out working and trying to do what was right by the men. So he did, he wasn't in a hurry to come get her and take her to the clinic for her to have her baby.
Mm.
So just having the everything like it did fall on the women. The women were the ones to keep everybody in line. I'm trying to think of like what my dad did. Like how did he help? And it wasn't him. It was like the first wife was the father and the mother of the household. She did everything. She's the one that kept everybody in line and, yeah. I'm trying to think of things specifically that I can share that I remember because my memory, that's been a big one too, is I would think back on my childhood and it would go gray. In my mind, it was just like gray. And so talking about it definitely does help bring things back up, but it's just like sometimes my brain goes blank. So
Yeah,
that's one of
and I
the
mean,
effects.
and that makes sense when you're living in such a highly controlled, you're the psychological dynamics of growing up in an environment like that. I mean, the brain has that trauma response of like, oh, we don't want to look at that, we don't need to remember that, it's not safe to
Yeah.
things. So it's interesting to watch you, and like witness you having that experience where it's like, oh yeah, my memory right now is just a blank slate. And it's normal. It's completely from a psychology perspective. That sort of thing is a normal response. Um, I'm curious to hear a bit more about the family dynamic, because I know some people watching this wouldn't be really familiar with how the family dynamics work inside that environment. So you talk about the first wife and the second wife. So you've got two moms. How does that dynamic actually form? What is the relationships there?
So my mothers are actually both sisters. So they have, my grandma on my mom's side is the same grandma. But my mother didn't live in the house a lot. My mother's deaf, and so they there was a lot of conflict between my moms. The first wife, she's my mom's older sister, so my grandma has four girls, and it goes the first mom, and then a girl, and then my mom. So I guess she's the third daughter in. Um, but my mother didn't live there a lot, so the first mom was the one that she literally did everything. She's the one, like she'd write up the job charts. She would, say, "Okay, Paula, you're in charge of this today," or "You're in charge of meals today," and she's the one that scheduled everything out and ran the household essentially. And my dad would be out working and doing projects outside of the house. He would come there for like the morning meet. We would have like a morning class and then an evening class, and then but it's the majority the first mom that did everything.
I find it interesting that you said a moment ago that you're essentially the woman ran everything, and you struggle to think like, what did my dad actually do? What role did he actually play in this? He'd come to do morning and evening class. And again, I'm hearing that reinforcing of so much is put on the woman inside of this community space. And it's a common thing for inside purity culture where all the responsibility is put onto women. You've got to be the one. You must dress a certain way, be a certain way, do all the labor and stuff, so that we're taking the load off of the men. We're taking the responsibility off of the men. Um, and that to me kind of reinforces the that toxic patriarchy that we kind of have in
100%.
society. Yeah, yeah.
100%. One of the sayings I remembered recently, like in the last few months, was they would say, "Show me a disobedient child, and I'll show you a disobedient mother."
Mm, mm,
So it was like the man was like, "Hey, we'd go to church, whatever," and they'd be like, "This is what needs to be done. This is how you guys need to live." And then it's on the woman to push that through, and she's the one that makes sure everything happens. She's the one that
mm,
makes sure, we're having the hourly prayer, that we're doing the monthly deep cleaning. All those things is, yeah, it was her. It wasn't, yeah. But one of the sad parts too is, in our struggles, as I've gotten out, I've worked through a lot of them, but like this one specifically is when I'm looking back and I'm like so angry at like the one mother, but then I'm not angry at my dad. He wasn't even there. So then there's that healing that, I've had to work through, that's like he wasn't even there. So I really can't be upset at just the one mom that was doing her best. I understand, whereas the narcissism and there's all those things, but ultimately she was doing her best, trying to be, the mother, the wife, and run the house and be obedient and all this stuff. But then the dad wasn't even there.
mm, mm. And what would the repercussions be? I'm not sure if you have the answer to this question. What would the repercussions be for your mother? If she wasn't running the household the way that she was, and she wasn't keeping everybody in line. If someone went astray, I assume that responsibility would come down on her first, not on the person who's gone astray. What were those repercussions like for her?
So towards the end, because that's when it got like really bad, was at the end when they were like they were starting to send people away. My dad was sent away in 2012 and our family left in 2015. But she had a son, two sons, like so my brothers that were, maybe they were talking to girls and someone else saw and they reported it, to the bishop or whatever. And so then the bishop called in the mom and was like telling, like, was going to send her away because of like what her children were doing. So taking her from the house and taking her out of the house. And they did that to some families, but one of the things I'm so grateful for is that she had said, "I will never leave my children." And in our family, we have 21. There's 21 of us children. And so when they threatened to send her away, then that's when she was like, she gathered us all in the living room and she said, "You guys have 5 seconds to decide if you're going to stay or come with us." And so she counted to five and no one said anything. So she's like, "Okay, you're coming with us." It was funny.
Uh, let's chat about the relational impact for you. So the long-term effects on like your relationships, forming things like trust, intimacy, and of course finding your own autonomy in the person that you are. What has that road been like for you?
I feel like it's been that one has formed in my relationships where I've gone on retreats and I would start struggling in like mentally kind of, I'd be like, hey, I need some help. It's so interesting because I've always known the points where I'm like, hey, I need some help. And so then I would schedule an appointment with my energy healer lady, and I'd have a session with her, and then like 6 months later or 3 to 6 months later, I'd be like, okay, I need another session. And I think that right there is where my identity started to form. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to sit and worry about what other people are thinking of me or how they think that I should be. I don't need to keep people pleasing. It still obviously is a long road of undoing the people pleasing and not doing that anymore. Because I still find myself where I'm like, I know I'm doing this just to make that person happy. But I learning to trust myself too, that was a big one. I remember going, I was at this retreat and I'm like thinking, I don't remember specifically what she was saying to bring up. And I was like, I had a thought come to my mind and I was like, no, it's not that thought. It has to be something way deeper than that thought.
Mm.
I thought that it couldn't be something, it couldn't be the first thing that came to my mind. It had to be way deeper. My problems had to be so much deeper than than say I was laughed at.
Mm.
So realizing and trusting myself that if I'm working on this specific thing and I don't know what the answer is, it's usually the first thought that came to my mind. And trusting myself in that.
Mm.
With my relationships, I think I was looking for in some of the people that I dated, because I definitely had my things with dating, that I was looking for my dad, the care, someone to care about me. I started looking
Mm.
for them in the people that I was dating. And so then when, I was giving everything like I had been shown, my mom's just giving, 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 giving. And I was doing that in a relationship. And then I wasn't getting what I needed. It was hard to like leave those relationships where I was doing that. But recognizing it, I didn't recognize it when I was in the relationship, but after I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I totally was looking for my dad to be there for me,
Mm.
you know?
No, because growing up, I mean, he wasn't really there. From what I'm hearing from your story, the person that was present were the moms,
Mm-hmm.
that were there. So that relationship is there, but and in functional society, you've got that dual aspect of masculine and feminine. The masculine is the safety, the provider, a different form of care to what that maternal aspect will give you. um,
Right.
yeah, so missing that type of connection, and I suppose not knowing what that connection is supposed to look like because you hadn't experienced it.
Right. Like my dad wasn't really involved. Like, I think that he was up until a point, and then it just got super serious, like where these men needed to go work and bring in money to the church.
Mm.
So, and then also, I mean, can you imagine having 21 children and then trying to like have a relationship with each one? It's even like strained to this day. It's just like he's almost like a friend. It's not like a father, or how
Mm.
how I would think a father is. It's not like I don't know. It's an interesting thing dynamic within me. Like I had lunch with him the other day and it's just not, it's more like, "Oh, how you doing? Okay." That, like a friend I would talk to, not like a father that looks out for his daughter. Although he
Mm.
might probably be really sad to hear that, but it's how I feel.
Um, and I mean, I assume your parents were born and raised into the cult that you were in. So I mean that's what all they know. So they're not taught healthy maternal and paternal traits within one another. The paternal side is taught like you're going to have kids and that's it. Like that is the extent of the relationship, and you're going to go off and focus on other things that are important for the greater community as such. So that's interesting to hear what the dynamic is like for you and having that relationship with your dad and forming a relationship with him. It's more like we're friends. There's no
Yeah.
there's no paternal, natural paternal like features coming through in this.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's been interesting. I've been, he's had some stuff happen lately, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not here to judge, and being that compassionate, forgiving person, sometimes it's you don't always need to be that person. And it's okay to have boundaries. Like it's okay to not talk to them, because I went for a little while, like when I first moved to South Carolina, then I was gone for 3 weeks, and I was kind of like coping by I would be before I had left. So I lived in St. George, and I would cope by coming to the house like every weekend. I'd come to dad's house just to like feel, I don't know, maybe wanted and loved, like, oh, I'm needed. That's the one. And so I was wanting to feel needed, so I would keep coming to the house. And then when I left, I was gone for 3 weeks, and I kind of just left. I didn't really say, hey guys, I'm leaving. But it's almost like it didn't really matter. You're one of the kids, do whatever you're gonna do. So when I had left, and then I was gone for 3 weeks, and I was feeling so homesick, and it was hard emotionally, and I came back and I walked in the front door, and my dad was sitting at the table, at our big huge dining room table, and he didn't even turn around. He didn't say hi. He didn't say anything to me. And that like solidified. I'm like, okay, it's okay that I go. But it was super painful to feel like it didn't matter if I was there. But it was also, I also needed it to be like, okay, it's okay if I go and focus on myself, and that I'm not here right now. So it sucked
Mm.
and was great at the same time.
I know those experiences. Um, and what about the fear of getting it wrong, as you've had this experience of transitioning out of, being told this is how you are, this is how you relate to the world around you, and having a lot of that shame around that kind of shame reinforcement. Um, the chat to me about things like lingering anxiety or perhaps some hypervigilance that may have gone on or may still be happening for you.
The anxiety, it still sometimes gets me. I'm like, am I doing the right thing in life? I'm like, am I on the right path? Like it's still there's still times where I do struggle with anxiety, um and I found what really is helpful is, or when I'm really just down on myself, and I'm like, hey, I don't need to be here anymore. Because I've definitely had the thoughts too of like, maybe if I wasn't here, those dark thoughts that come in, and they're like, maybe you don't need to be on earth anymore. And I've thought about them, but I've never really had a plan where I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna peace out on earth. I'm not gonna do it anymore. Um, but I feel like what's really helped is having friends, and actually talking about what I'm feeling, instead of like, oh, I'm doing okay, I'm doing fine. Actually talking about what I'm struggling with, or maybe what I'm thinking, or thoughts going through my mind. I usually find that a little time with, like, some good girlfriends, or some good, like, my sisters, usually really helps when I'm struggling with the anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah, because to try and navigate those kinds of things like anxiety, hypervigilance, it's okay if I don't wake up tomorrow, I'll be all right with that. Those kinds of mindsets. To have a safe place to put those things. Where there isn't any judgment. People are going to be like, oh, you can't think like that. Yeah, it's people take for granted the safe spaces that they can cultivate for themselves when you are dealing with that kind of anxiety and that level of hypervigilance. Um, what has your healing journey look like in reclaiming your independence, your agency, and establishing like who is Paula, who am I in this world? I mean, I'm sure you're on that journey and you're still defining that. But what does that journey look like for you over the years?
Hmm. When I first started doing the energy work, and I would go to the retreats and I'd go be in the circles, I would never get in the middle of the circle. I'm always like, no, I can't be one that's in the middle. I can't be one that they're looking at and they're like, and probably in my mind I was thinking, oh, I have issues, but it's okay that, I could hold space for other people that, had issues, but not for me. I can't be the one that, has something wrong or something that's going on or something that I was struggling with. But it was okay for other people too. In my mind, I'm like, I can hold grace and compassion for them, but I couldn't for me. I had a really hard time like allowing myself to be like, okay, unless it was like a one-on-one thing. Like I was talking to someone that I trusted because I think too, if I growing up, whenever you shared anything, it was like, oh, like I felt like everybody knew, the whole community knew all your problems and your issues. And maybe it wasn't, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit on that, but it felt that way. You tell your mom, and then all of a sudden your dad's saying something to you about something that you shared with your mom, and you're like, I didn't tell you,
Mm.
kind of a thing. But over time, I just am like, it's okay, where I'm at now, I'm definitely farther along than, when we left. But realizing it's okay to have, you're not perfect. It's okay that, you're not feeling good. It's okay to share what you're feeling, like you said, with those trusted friends and that safe space. It's okay that you're struggling with a certain thing that maybe you think, you shouldn't be. Or you think, oh, I thought I was past that. And actually, there's still a little bit that's bothering me. But it's usually just like the little bits. It's like, here's the big thing, and there's this much that's bothering you. And you're almost past that little teeny tiny bit that just pops up. It's like, hey, I'm still here. And also sitting with what it is you're feeling instead of pushing it away. Like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm not perfect right now, or I'm feeling like I'm a horrible person, and just being like, hey, like, or sitting with anxiety. That's a better word. Sitting with it and not pushing it away and getting curious about the emotion. So I'll be curious and I'll be like, okay, so where is it? And usually I feel a lot in my heart space. Like that's just where I feel it. And I'll imagine the emotion getting really big and popping. I'll just be like, oh, that was, just watching it get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and then pop. I'd be like, okay, that wasn't that bad. And usually that will do it for me. Yeah.
Do you think having left at a relatively young age has made the process a bit easier for you to unpack and move throughout the years? If you had been there, through into your 30s or your 40s, do you think that the having left at a younger age had made a big difference for you?
For sure. I look at my parents and I look at my aunts and uncles and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being under that pressure of having, making sure everything is perfect, everything to look a certain way. And like we've said, it is on the mothers. The mothers are the ones that it falls onto, and you just got to do it. Um, So yes, I was like, for a little while there, I was the youngest person that was in like the healing circles and stuff that I was going to. So I definitely think that it helped. But I remember thinking like one of my biggest things was I cannot put my children through what I went through. Like I remember thinking that in like when I was in the church, and I remember like where I was standing, and I was like, if when I have a child, we'll never know the things that I went through. We'll never have to go through that. And that was one of my big pushing factors too, that I was like, I don't want my child to have to experience what I experienced, which I feel like that's pretty much parents anyway, you know. We're like, I don't want my child to have to feel the things that I went through. And I guess that's probably how we evolve.
Absolutely, and it's such a prevalent point that you make there because when we chat to people who come from cults and high control religious environments, you're told how to do, how to be, how to act, what to wear, and you lose that sense of identity that you still have this part of yourself that says something here is not right. I don't want anyone else to experience what it is that I'm currently experiencing. And that for you at that young age, you had that thought of, if I have kids, I don't want them to experience this. I don't want them to feel the things that I'm currently feeling. So it's like inside, the deep inside of you, like something here is not right. This is not how life is supposed to be. This is very incorrect. And I would think for your moms as well, that there's still that maternal instinct that kicks in and says, this isn't right for me or for my kids. And probably what got them to move towards, like, hey, we've got to leave, we've got to get out of this isn't right for us. um, Relearning to trust yourself again, and finding like where is personal responsibility for yourself. So I think you put that really beautifully. Like, if I had children, I don't want them to experience these things. Where have you learned to trust yourself again, and learn what are you responsible for in life and what are you not responsible for in life, especially as a woman coming from that type of environment where all the responsibility is put on the woman.
I think when I first wanted to, get into being a practitioner and I'm like, I have to learn how to do this for other people. And as an oldest daughter, I'm sure I had the savior complex where I'm like, I have to save everybody. I have to save my parents. I have to save my siblings. I have to save my grandma. I have to save everybody. And I'd heard, like, after I was doing this and I was pushing it on people too, I'm like, you guys have to learn this stuff. I had to save, my boyfriend and his family. And I was just like trying to share the information. And I, I'd heard that when we're over there pushing, or wherever we are, when we're pushing our beliefs onto someone, it's no different than being in a cult. I'm taking my stuff that I've learned, and you need to learn what I've learned.
Mm.
So that was kind of like, oh shit, I don't want to be doing that. I don't want people to think, oh my gosh, I'm over here pushing my thoughts and feelings when you don't even really have an interest in
Mm.
what I've learned or how I've got to where I've gotten to, but I'm pushing it all onto you. So that I had an experience where my dad was getting upset at one of my brothers, and I kind of jumped in. Like, I wasn't even a part of the situation, but I kind of jumped in. And then I was talking to someone else about it later, and they pointed out how I inserted myself into a situation I didn't necessarily need to. Like, I didn't need to save anybody. And I felt a lot of shame. I was like, oh my gosh. That was another light bulb moment for me, too, where I was like, oh shit, I'm trying to save everybody. I'm trying to save them from conflict, from all the things that felt uncomfortable to me. I'm trying to save them from it as well. And I really had to sit with that one. And now I'm like, okay, I see that there's a conflict here, and I just trust, because if I can figure it out, they can as well, is my thinking now. I'm like, I see that there's a conflict right there, and I know it's hard. And even if some person, I don't jump into it unless they ask for my opinion, or I'll ask, do you want to know what I'm thinking, or do you want to know my opinion? And then I'll encourage them, and I'm like, you can do it. Like, I just try to encourage them and show them that they have the power inside of themselves to to get through the conflict, to get through whatever it is. And even with myself, like, I've been through some tough situations, and I'm like, hey, I'm in this situation, I got myself into it, and I can get myself out. Like, if I can walk right in here, I can turn around and walk back out. That was a big one too. I'm like, I really don't like how I'm feeling right now, and I don't like where I'm at. So how do I change that? So realizing that I'm creating some of the situations that I put myself in, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't like that. If I got myself in it, I can get myself out.
Yeah. I love that because that's where you're learning to take responsibility for yourself and your actions. It's like I put
Yeah,
myself here, got the choice to take myself out of this. And you're hinging into the next part of the conversation where we're looking at you as a practitioner for other people. I mean, you've got the energy work, there's the shamanic drumming that I know that you do, and establishing healthy boundaries. As practitioners, we can't tell the people that we work with, this is what you should be doing or how you should be doing. And the savior complex, I think, is a big one, because a lot of people come to spirituality and come to being a spiritual practitioner because they've got that savior complex. I've been through this thing, I've saved myself, I've figured it out for myself, I have all these realizations, and I've got to go and fix the rest of the world now because I
right.
don't want other people to experience these things. So as a practitioner that works with other people, how have you established good ethics for yourself inside of your practice and being a practitioner, and what is healthy spirituality for you now?
I haven't been practicing a lot of it lately. I haven't been doing the shamanic drumming. I have my drum, but I haven't been meeting with clients and doing stuff like that. I was trying to figure that out because I was trying to save people, and I realized that I'm not the grand savior. I can save myself, but I didn't continue like booking and letting people book with me because I was still struggling. I feel like now I would do a lot better, but I was still struggling with like with all the things honestly that we talked about. And so I didn't feel like I was capable to give direction and guidance. It was like, okay, you have this thing that's broken, we need to fix that thing. But that's probably how I was feeling. Maybe I felt like I had the thing that was broken, and then I was projecting a little bit of that. So I didn't continue with I am a practitioner, but I haven't been taking clients.
Mm.
What was the other part of the question?
What does healthy spirituality look like for you now?
I feel like it's more of encouraging people and showing them that they can those hard things that they're really struggling with. I will be there to support them, but it isn't for me to fix. So if
Mm.
someone's like coming to me and they're saying, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this thing," I feel like it's so important to encourage them and empower them that they can, they can get through the hard thing. This is just a moment too. This isn't forever. Remembering it, it's I have a sister that's struggling with some work stuff. I'm like, girl, this isn't forever. And then also asking them how they want to go about it. How do you want to fix that thing? How do you redirecting it back to them? Okay, so you don't like that thing. Okay, so then what do you feel like you get to do? And reminding people they always have a choice. They always have a choice. It might feel like we don't, but we always have a choice.
Absolutely. And that's I love your raw authenticity in that, where you're trained in some really beautiful modalities, and you're like, I'm not prepped for that to take clients right now. I'm working through my own stuff and figuring my own stuff out. And that for me, it speaks to the ethical side of practitioners, where to an extent, I mean, we will always have things to work through. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 odd years, and I still have things where I'm like, oh, I need to address that, need to work on that, but I'm still okay to work with my clients. um I've got the saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself and someone
Yeah.
else. I think you do that so beautifully, where you got that level of self-awareness where firstly I understand I've come from this thing of, savior complex. I need to fix everyone. I need to make everyone feel better. And also the people pleasing aspect comes into that.
Hmm.
And you've shifted away from that, and you're like, that's not healthy for me to do that. That's not the right way for me to do that. So it really speaks to high level of ethics that you've developed for yourself. When should you choose to move back into taking clients and working with people, I think that they would know that you're coming from a very strong ethical standpoint, and you're coming from right intentions, not
Yeah.
I'm here to fix you, I'm here to make you better, I'm going to take all your problems away, because we don't do that as practitioners.
Mm-mm.
That's not what we're for. Um, if you could share anything with anyone who's possibly living inside very intense purity culture, maybe stuck in a high control religious environment, or they're trying to move away from that heavy, intense dogma that we find within religion, towards spirituality, finding themselves, doing life for themselves. What would you share with someone like that?
I would probably say, I mean, I'm talking to my younger self here, that if you feel like something is off, something is off. And our intuition is never wrong. We have such strong intuition, and it usually is that first thought. If you're doubting, if you're doubting something's not right, something's not right, or you're questioning, trust that. Trust what you're feeling, and you do have the answers inside of yourself. I wanted to say too, when it comes to practitioners, I'm thinking of myself when I was like looking for healing and all that kind of stuff. I was thinking everything came from outside of ourselves. I needed someone to do Reiki on me because I couldn't deal with the emotion that was coming up, or I couldn't deal with the pain that I was feeling from a relationship. And I think that what we need is just support. I think we need to have, good, healthy friends and safe spaces where we can go through whatever it is we're feeling and realizing that we are strong. We are resilient humans. We really are. And the answers are all inside of us.
I think that's so beautifully put. And again, it speaks to the thing of, the practitioners there to hold space like that. That's literally all that we do. We're not doing the healing. We're not doing the work. And I think a lot of people have that misconception in coming to a spiritual practitioner, or just spirituality in general, that, it's this magic wand, or this magic healing session, or this magic drum, or this magic tool that's going to just fix everything for me in one go.
Yeah.
It's like, nah, there's some work that you gotta do there. you gotta do
Yeah.
the stuff yourself. We're just here to hold the space, and give you the space in which to do what you already know for yourself, how to do. So I
Yeah.
think you put that really beautifully, that you've got the answers inside of you already. Um, and I hear that quite frequently when I ran religious trauma circles, and meeting other people that have come from cults and high religious control environments, that um, they moved out of it because something inside of them said, hey, this isn't right, something here is not right, and I need to trust myself, I need to trust what it is that I'm feeling for myself. And that's asking questions and questioning the environment and what's going on here, that it is okay to do those things, because I think there's an element of, you're made to feel it's not safe to question. You're not allowed to, question
100%.
authority, and question the control dynamic. But if you're asking the questions on the inside, they're coming from that intuitive aspect that says something here isn't correct. I need to ask these questions. I think you put that really beautifully. Um, any final thoughts before we close?
I want to say, I think that's how our intuition gets stuffed because, we're questioning, like, say, maybe something's not right here, like something doesn't feel right. And then maybe you talk to somebody and you're, or you're taught in church or religion, whatever. Like, I feel like the high religion, high, whatever, I forget what it's called. I'm not in it anymore.
I control
Um, yes. When we're like looking outside of us, so something's not right here, and then we're like, oh, maybe I'll ask, and they're like, oh no. And I feel like sometimes it's men that push it down because say we're in this religion, this confined thing, and then we question, and they're like, oh no, no, that's not right. Put it on the shelf. Don't question anymore. So then we stuff it, and then we're like, oh, when we get out, we're like, that I was right all along. My intuition was right all along. I knew something was wrong. So, and if we have that, if we're questioning internally and we're building that, we're already going to be so strong. It doesn't really matter what the outside someone outside of us is saying, because we know yeah, we just know because we built the muscle inside of us, our brain, that's where we've worked through it maybe by ourselves or with trusted people, that muscle is strong, that when the outside voices start coming in and they're like, you know, you're not, that's not right, you already know what your next step is.
Mm, absolutely. I think those are some really beautiful words of wisdom to close the this episode on. Paula, a huge thank you for being brave enough to come and share your story. And being willing to share your story, because there is a huge surge of people moving from like hardcore religion, dogma, cults, towards spirituality, finding themselves stepping out, establishing that intuitive aspect for themselves. To hear someone else's story, I think could give hope and even direction to somebody else who's trying to navigate something like that. So a huge immense amount of gratitude for your sharing and that willingness to share, because it is important conversations to have, because there is that big shift that we have happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you hugely for sharing today. Um, this has
Thank
been
you,
the
Pam.
of course, of course. Yeah, this has been a very enlightening conversation for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm well familiar with the cult that you have come from, and I have watched and seen other people's experiences from it as well. So I know um, it's not an easily lived experience by any means. It's unless
No,
you've lived through something like that. Um, you can't really wrap your head around it. So yeah, I fully acknowledge that. Um, this has been an incredible episode. I'm back next month with Jen Richardson. She's coming to chat about what healthy Christianity actually does look like. Jen will be sharing her personal story of how she's established healthy Christianity, navigating different churches, different scriptures. So we're talking a lot about toxic Christianity. We're talking a lot about toxic religious cults and things like that. But we do need to shine a light on there is a healthy story to these things. So please do join me next month for my conversation with Jen Richardson. And until then, keep trusting that intuition and keep leaning into knowing that you've got the answers inside of yourself.